Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for week 2 of the GCRF AgriFood Africa virtual missions. We're delighted that you can join us live, or if you're watching this after the events, fantastic that you can do that as well. Hopefully you'll be streaming this either on Facebook or YouTube, and it's great that you can join us. These missions are really designed to bring together British and African organizations, and we are really excited about the week that we had just gone. It went extremely well, and I think this week is going to be another fantastic week. So thank you very much for joining us. Just let me run through a couple of things that you'll need to know just for how we're running this session. So the talks that we're going to be showing today are pre-recorded. The reason we did that is to make sure that we didn't have any technical issues, especially given that many of our speakers are from different parts of the world. You can, however, participate in the question and answer session, and the way that you do that is you type in your questions into YouTube chat or via the Facebook chat, and then we will pass those on to the speakers. So early bird catches the worm, is a British saying, and so if you would perhaps type in your questions as soon as you think about them, and then we're more likely to be able to get to them. We will obviously try to work through the questions, but if we have too many, we may not be able to do that. But we will do our best to meet all the answer all the questions. And the session will run for an hour and 15, so we'll be done at 11:15 GMT UK time today. So just a couple of other things about the week that you might be wanting to be aware of. If you want to tweet through us, you can do that on Twitter. If you use the hashtag Agri-food Africa, that really helps you sort of stand out a bit. You can like and subscribe this video on YouTube just to grow the channel, and then you'll be aware of future content that comes out. We'll be using this channel for the next 5 years, so it's worth doing that. One of the things that we're hoping for this week is that people will network together, and the way that you do that is through our platform Meeting Mojo. You do need to register as an attendee of this week, and we've got formal sessions lined up on Tuesday and Friday, but also due to popular demand, we're going to do one on Wednesday after the pitches. So do sign up for the week, and then you can sort of network with other organizations. Mentioning the pitches, that's a 2-minute presentation about what you are looking for in any partnership and what you're able to offer. Went very well last week, and we're hoping to have some other people present. So if you do want to do that, you've got a very short window to do that now. You've got a couple of days just to submit. So I think it's one day actually. I think that we're shutting them tomorrow. So do let us know if you want to pitch. You can do that via the website, and we look forward to hearing you. Right, I think that's enough of the general points that I wanted to make. It's going to be a great week. We'll have some more speakers throughout the different sessions. On Friday, we've got a special panel, which is a live event and one not to be missed. So without further ado, we are going to start our first presentation. But before I do that, I'd just like to introduce today's speakers to you. So first up, we have Jane Brookman, who is the lead on this program. She works for the KTN, my organization as well, as a knowledge transfer specialist. I work alongside her. My name is Tim Messeder. I'm a knowledge transfer manager, and this is my principal program. So you're going to hear from Jane this morning. You're also going to be hearing from Catherine Miller, who is an innovation lead at Innovate UK. She works in food and nutrition, and she's been working there for a number of years. This is also this program is one that she oversees. We're delighted that we can have Susie Kitchens with us today. She's the British Deputy High Commissioner for Kenya. She's based in Nairobi and has been there for a while. She's very involved there, and she's presented her presentation, and we look forward to getting questions for her. Last but not by no means least, we've also got Professor William from Otin Napi, who's joining us from Uganda, a country I love particularly because I spent some time there. And he's the founder and chairman of the Africa Innovations Institute, or AFRI, which is an NGO and based in Kampala, and they're focusing on science and technology and innovation, which is wonderful because that's sort of the theme, if you like, of this virtual missions. So those are our 4 speakers. I'm going to play them through, and if you have any questions, type them into the chat and we'll get to those. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Jane Brookman, the KTN lead for the GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme. In the title slide here, you can see the members of the KTN AgriFood team working on this project, including the head of Agri-food, David Telford, and my key colleague within the team, Tim Messeder, who you will hear from on several occasions throughout this week. On behalf of KTN, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for this inaugural set of virtual missions. I hope that you find them both interesting and productive, whether you're joining us just for one or many sessions throughout the next 3 weeks. But first of all, I would like to quickly introduce you to the Knowledge Transfer Network, or KTN. We are funded by Innovate UK and others to support innovation for the benefit of the economy and society. We bring together businesses, entrepreneurs, academics and government or other funders to inform business innovation and research needs, to build businesses and to grow technologies for the benefit of all. And my colleague from Innovate UK, Catherine Miller, will describe more later today on the background, aims and approaches of the GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme. But I'd just like to highlight the dissemination and collaboration activity component of the programme, which I'm responsible for. Now, a large part of this work is capacity building, as shown on the block at the bottom right. And we do this through a range of outreach activities and collaborative events. We're responsible for building networks between members of the agri-food systems within African countries and those stakeholders within the UK. And of course, ordinarily, we would have embarked upon a number of face-to-face missions to encourage future collaboration and allow a number of companies from the UK to learn more about possible African partners and their economies. But clearly, with the changes in the world brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, these face-to-face missions are just not possible at this time. We therefore decided to try a different approach, and hence we've designed these virtual missions to continue that effort to build community, with the possible advantage, you might think, that we can engage with a wider range of African countries than we would have been able to visit face to face. We will also be able to encourage a larger number of businesses, academics and other stakeholders from the UK to learn something of the agri-food systems across the entire sub-Saharan regions of Africa. Of course, we will also be providing opportunities for networking in much the same way as we would have done ordinarily if we'd have had a physical face-to-face mission. And we'll be introducing the next round of the Agritech Catalyst funding. Now, these missions will be split according to the 3 geographical regions shown in this slide, and we're also split across 2 separate weeks of activities. The first week will feature a variety of morning and afternoon activities aimed at informing UK audiences and providing UK and African companies interested in finding out more about doing business from a sort of creation or exploitation of innovation angle with both information and contacts. We hope to provide an opportunity for potential UK and African partners to highlight their capabilities and to outline what they're looking for in any future relationship. The first week for each region will be structured as shown in this slide. On Monday, the programme overview and funding mechanisms, where we provide you with a general overview of the Agri-food Africa programme and how we aim to work together with both UK and African agri-food partners. On Tuesday, the regional profiles and networking sessions, where more information on the regional features of the African agri-food landscape will be provided and a formal opportunity for networking. On Wednesday and Thursday, we will basically have mirror days where we showcase UK and African experience and capability, followed by specific pitches. These days provide examples of working together, the capabilities, technologies and expertise that organisations can bring to potential joint projects. The pitches are 2-minute long videos, and we encourage you to consider submitting a pitch for your own interests and capabilities, and also to join in the sessions to hear the others submitted and perhaps contact them through the networking sessions. On Friday, there'll be a networking session and a panel, and we finish the week off with a formal networking session and a short panel discussion to consider the week's activities. So here's a reminder that we'd like to encourage everyone to take part in the networking activities throughout the week, to learn from each other and to seek help from KTN if there is any needed. The second week for each set of regional activities will provide further opportunities to engage, and these will be run from mid-July, with Southern and Central in the week commencing 13th of July, Eastern the following week commencing July 20th, and finally the Western region week commencing 27th of July. This second week is focused on hearing back from participants of the first week, really, providing support for consortia through practical activities such as clinics and workshops for writing applications. How can we help complete consortia, for example, if one specific partner is sought, or an end user maybe? We'd like to hear from you as participants on what would help you and what you would like to hear or find out about in this second week, and we can then try to tailor the programme. We're aiming to try and put together 2 to 3 sessions each week. So finally, I'd like to thank all the speakers who have agreed to give up their time under quite difficult circumstances to help us try to keep the GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme rolling on and to generate some real activity in terms of increasing mutual understanding of the agri-food systems of sub-Saharan Africa and the UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Jane. It was very useful to see the role of KTN within this programme and also the overview of this week. We are now going to hear from Catherine Miller, who is going to give us an overview of the greater programme which these virtual missions sit. So, over to you, Catherine.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's event. I'm delighted to see so many of you online today. I'm Catherine Miller and I'm Innovation Lead for Food and Nutrition at Innovate UK. This is a short summary of what I'm going to cover in the next 10 minutes. So I'm going to give a brief overview of Innovate UK and UK Research and Innovation, a background to the Global Challenges Research Fund, talk about the challenge that the funding is trying to address, and then cover some of the work we have done already around the Agritech Catalyst. And then I'm going to give an overview of the GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme. Innovate UK is part of UK Research and Innovation, or UKRI. UKRI brings together the 7 research councils, Innovate UK and Research England, and together with government we invest over £7 billion a year in research and innovation by partnering with academia and industry to fund the best research. As part of UK Research and Innovation, Innovate UK drives productivity and economic growth by supporting businesses to develop and realise the potential of new ideas, including those from the UK's world-class research base. We support businesses to realise the potential of new technologies, develop ideas and make them a commercial success. We are the UK's innovation agency. The UK's Agritech strategy was launched in 2013 with the aims of improving the translation of research into practical application for agriculture and related industries in the UK and overseas. This was an initial investment of £160 million, which funded 4 Agritech centres for innovation and also the Agritech Catalyst for translational research. There are 4 centres for agricultural innovation in the UK. These are CHAP, Crop Health and Protection, which focuses on crop pests and disease and protecting natural resources as well as soil health. Agri-EPI, which focuses on precision engineering. Agrimetrics, focusing on collating, connecting and analysing complex data. And CL, focusing on livestock nutrition, health and genetics. These centres have grown the UK's capacity for world-class research. They're open access platforms to be used by anyone, aiming to deliver applied research to solve industry problems. The centres work together as a family and can act as a gateway into the UK market. The Global Challenges Research Fund, or GCRF, is a £1.5 billion fund announced by the UK government in late 2015. It aims to support cutting-edge research that addresses the challenges faced by developing countries. GCRF forms part of the UK's Official Development Assistance, or ODA, commitment, which is monitored by the OECD. And alongside other GCRF delivery partners, programmes have been designed that promote challenge-led disciplinary and interdisciplinary research, strengthen capacity for research, innovation and knowledge exchange in the UK and developing countries through partnership with excellent UK research and researchers, and to provide an agile response to emergencies where there is an urgent research need. GCRF funding to support the Agri-Tech Catalyst focuses on the GCRF challenge area, secure and resilient food systems supported by sustainable marine resources and agriculture under the Equitable Access to Sustainable Development theme. This coordinated programme of activities has been designed to realise the sustainable management of the food production systems in a way that alleviates poverty, enhances economic prosperity and delivers improved well-being, with key outcomes including sustainable intensification in African agriculture, improvements in human health and diversity in diets and nutrition, having a positive impact on rural income and food security, and facilitating trade in agricultural products. Secondary benefits of GCRF funding will also be realised by UK businesses through new partnerships in Africa that will facilitate collaboration, trade and export opportunities for mutual benefit. The GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme is focusing on a major global challenge. We need a climate-smart agriculture and food system that by 2030 will feed the predicted global population of over 9 billion people with nutritious and safe foods. It needs to use resources sustainably, also be resilient and be able to adapt to climate change and generate inclusive jobs and growth. 75% of the poorest people in the world are rural and depend on agriculture, livestock, forestry and fisheries for their livelihoods. Innovation in developing country agriculture, particularly in Africa, is low, and new innovation and technology is needed to tackle emerging threats such as climate change and new pests and diseases. Another major investment under the Agri-Tech strategy was the Agri-Tech Catalyst. The government investment was a total of £70 million. The Catalyst has funded well over 150 projects to date, and these are industry and research collaborative projects to improve translation of research into practical applications for agriculture and related industries in the UK and overseas. There was £10 million initial investment from the Department for International Development, and another £10 million of funding has since been invested between 2018 and today. So DFID has funded the Catalyst since 2013 and has funded it so far across 9 competition rounds. 58 projects have been funded, 53 of those have been in Africa. Now this has delivered over £20 million of grant funding across 13 African countries. Round 9 projects haven't been announced yet, but will fund a further 13 projects and provide an additional £6 million worth of funding. Of the 58 projects funded through the Agri-Tech Catalyst, the scope has been broad, covering research and innovation in agriculture, food systems and nutrition. Projects are focused on control of crop pests and disease, adding value to waste, reducing food losses in the supply chain and improving food safety. We have also funded projects looking at non-food uses of crops, improving productivity for smallholder farmers and tackling livestock disease, for example vaccinations. Innovate UK has received funding from the GCRF programme to complement the existing international development arm of the Agri-Tech Catalyst and work alongside the DFID Agri-Tech Catalyst investment to develop innovative technology in agriculture, food systems and nutrition in Africa. This is a £26 million 5-year programme that started last year. A coordinated programme of activities has been designed to stimulate innovation in agriculture, food system and nutrition. The programme has a broad scope, recognising that to improve nutrition for all in both rural and growing urban areas, we need to make changes not only in how food is grown and produced, but also how it's processed, transported, marketed and consumed, taking into account the whole supply chain and innovation in all areas of it. The GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme is made up of 3 main activities: the Technology Accelerator Programme, Skills Training and dissemination and collaboration activity. The Technology Accelerator Programme includes funding for seeding awards. These are being led by the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council, or BBSRC. They are academic pump priming awards to fund short projects to accelerate impact. These aim to build on previous investments made by UK research and innovation and provide an opportunity for UK research organisations to work with African organisations on an agri-food challenge. These are about building on existing investments and accelerating impact. The Technology Accelerator Programme also includes industry-led collaborative research and development and builds on the success of the Agritech Catalyst, and this has allowed us to provide more funding for high-quality projects and to fund additional rounds of the Catalyst. Round 10 of the Catalyst is due to open in July this year and close in October, with £2.5 million available. There is also funding for further rounds of the Catalyst and funds specifically aimed at later stage research, and you can find out more about the Catalyst specifically this afternoon. The skills and training activity is based on the Knowledge Transfer Partnership, or KTP model, funding partnerships across a series of competition rounds. These aim to embed new capability in African businesses to help them grow and be successful. They will also develop new partnerships between the UK and African countries and address challenges facing agriculture and the food sector within Africa. The initial target countries are Kenya, Ghana, Nigeria and South Africa, and the KTP programme will fund 2-year knowledge transfer partnerships between a UK academic, an African academic and an African business. And you can hear more about this later in a different session. The final part of the programme is dissemination and collaboration activity. This activity includes innovation awards for early stage projects to build new collaborations, which you can hear more about in a session later on in the programme. This part of the programme is being led by the KTN, who you've heard from previously. And this programme includes developing better understanding of African needs across the agri-food supply chain through missions and outreach, and to build collaboration and partnership between the UK and Africa. And this series of virtual missions is part of the dissemination and collaboration activity. I hope that gives you an overview of the programme, and there will be further sessions on specific funding opportunities, for example, the latest round of the Agritech Catalyst later in the programme. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Catherine. It was great to hear a bit more about the programme, its goals and aims. We are now going to pass over to our keynote speaker, Susie Kitchens, that very kindly agreed to deliver her talk on the agri-food landscape in Kenya.
Good morning and hello to the virtual mission under the GCRF AgriFood Africa Programme with the Knowledge Transfer Network. I'm really glad to be part of today's community, virtual as per our new reality, to highlight the challenges and trends in Africa's, well, particularly Kenya's, agri-food systems. Your mission is about East Africa, but because I'm based in Kenya, I'll be speaking specifically about Kenya, but I think there is a genuine read across to many of the challenges, and of course the region's economies have a great deal of interdependence. Kenya, however, I think, and I'm probably pretty biased, is particularly exciting due to its dynamic entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem. So this makes Kenya a really good petri dish for exploring agri-tech and agribusiness. Now, I'm talking to you from Nairobi. I can't travel to the UK and you can't come here because of coronavirus. And because of the virus and because of the pretty stringent measures that the government of Kenya have taken, which have been pretty effective in stemming the spread of the virus, the need to support agri-tech and agribusiness and to focus on food security is probably more important than ever. So we're focusing on tech-enabled business support to really get to be partner with the Kenyans in this endeavour. Going digital is no longer simply part of how we do our day-to-day business, but the foundations for growing economic activity, which has sadly been hit badly because of the virus. COVID-19 and the lockdown measures are forcing us to rethink how we work and how we can respond nimbly to finding and connecting markets with new solutions. Now, the reason that I'm talking to you today about agri-food challenges and opportunities in Kenya, it's most definitely not because I'm a farmer, I'm far from that, but I chair the Science, Tech and Innovation Board at the British High Commission in Nairobi. This brings together colleagues across 5 government departments, and we are united by our programmes and our passion for supporting innovative tech-based disruptions to create prosperity, to create jobs, and to be partners in sustainable, positive social impact in Kenya. So I hope that through these few slides that I'm going to share, you'll get a sense of our enthusiasm and our ambition in growing partnerships in agri-food to do this. Second slide, we'll see that the agri-food sector in Kenya really is ripe for disruption. So while some of you may envisage the very lush Rift Valley when you think about Kenya, in fact 80% of Kenya is arid and semi-arid lands. Maize is by far the dominant crop here, accounting for about 90% of crop production, with other crops including wheat, beans, peas, bananas and potatoes. Across the whole farming sector, dairy is the largest sector, contributing about 8% of Kenya's GDP. But within that, within the dairy sector, 80% of production comes from smallholder farmers and pastoralists. So it is really widespread and thereby has a lot of efficiency challenges. Now, Kenya's food processing sector is very domestically focused. 85% of food processed in Kenya is sold within the domestic market, only 15% exported. And within that domestic market, 30% is sold through the formal sector, so supermarkets, which might seem quite low, but is in fact the second highest total in sub-Saharan Africa. But the majority, 70% of food and food processed food in Kenya is sold through street vendors and unregulated markets. So that's an overview of the sector. Now let's look with the next slide at the challenges. So there is a huge productivity challenge in Kenyan agri sectors. I talked about maize being the biggest crop here. Production efficiency is low. Kenya gets about 1.6 tonnes per hectare, which compares disfavourably with Ethiopia's 3.7 tonnes per hectare, and of course a whopping 6 tonnes per hectare in the US. The dairy sector, biggest sector, milk production is also low, can be as low as 850 kilograms per cow, whereas in the UK we squeeze out about 7,900 kilograms of milk per cow. Another challenge is Kenya's reliance on imports. So wheat, one of the staple crops I mentioned as being big in Kenya's agri-sector, still, while Kenya consumes about 2.7 million tonnes of wheat, Kenya produces only 300,000, so wheat is massively reliant on imports. Eggs, love this example. So no shortage of eggs in Kenya, there's chickens everywhere, but we know eggs are quite difficult to transport. Obviously they need cold storage, they're very breakable, they're difficult to stack. So you'd think that using eggs and making them, processing them where they come from would be good marketing, but in fact there is no commercial domestic production of mayonnaise in Kenya, and Kenyans spend 12 billion shillings on mayonnaise. Okay. And these issues of import reliance are being exacerbated by COVID-19. I mentioned stringent measures by the government of Kenya. That includes measures to isolate counties from each other. So there was a ban on crossing over county lines, which obviously makes domestic distribution very challenging. There's also a curfew, which limits travel time, and a strict instruction to stay home. Another challenge facing Kenya's agri-food sector is food safety. In November 2019, 7 domestic brands of peanut butter were banned due to aflatoxins. Moving on to the next slide. Moving on to the next slide, market linkages, another real challenge in the sector. Many of you will be familiar with the excellent work of companies like Twiga Foods, supported by the British government in their early days. Now, Twiga have really helped to link small-scale farmers with markets. But what we need now is better connectivity between farmers and food processors. Because at the moment, due to poor connectivity, many processors are importing raw materials, even when they're available in Kenya, just because they're so difficult and expensive to access. And here's an interesting challenge that we see as a genuine one: perceptions of agriculture. So many Kenyans have a small shamba as part of their side hustle, but you won't find many young Kenyans who really want to be a farmer when they grow up. Farming has a poor reputation. Their farmers are perceived as being poor, struggling, needing subsidies and handouts, and the average age of the farmer is way higher than the median age of Kenyans. So how can we change this perception? How can we make agriculture sexy? We think a focus on agribusiness and agri-tech will really help. So that moves us on to the next slide. Onto the next slide, slide 6, where we talk about the fascinating and exciting opportunities all around Kenya. So for me, the reason that I chose to come to Kenya after my previous posting, which was in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was right there in the heart of one of the world's most dynamic and exciting entrepreneurship communities, was exactly because of this: Silicon Savannah. Kenya has incredible dynamism, ideas, entrepreneurs, can-do innovators, and the potential there for translating good ideas into commercialisable businesses at scale is really exciting. And we are seeing some of this in the agri-food sector. So across sub-Saharan Africa, a full 25% of agri-tech startups are from Kenya. Now, the majority of these will be in Nairobi, which is the ecosystem centre, but I know of at least 19 hubs outside of Nairobi that are supporting young entrepreneurs, and there's real excitement there. One of the reasons for Kenya's success in scaling up their businesses and entrepreneurship is around high mobile penetration. Many of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with the incredible success story of M-Pesa mobile money, also seed funded by the British government. And DigiFarm's a really exciting example of a company exploiting that, which I'm happy to talk about later. Solar potential. Kenya is ripe for more renewable energy usage. This is, of course, attractive because so many Kenyans are still off-grid, so small-scale solar panels are becoming more accessible, cheaper, easier to maintain, and more widely accepted. So we're seeing companies like Sun Culture really capitalising on that move towards solar power, and M-Copper using solar to maintain cold chains, which is so vitally important in the agri-food system. So is agri-processing the next solar frontier? Could somebody here, as part of this mission, be thinking about mobilising solar power for good in the agri-food sector? I do hope so. And then back to more fundamental science. So within Kenya we have ILRI, the International Livestock Research Institute, which is world renowned for being a centre of excellence in agriculture.
What?
My next slide looks...
Oh.
My next slide looks a little bit more at this fundamental science. UK CDR recently released a study which showed that over the last 5 years, Kenya had been the recipient of, I think, about £167 million worth of ODA research partnership funding. And as this slide shows, the lion's share of that has gone into food security. Food security is one of President Kenyatta's big 4 priorities for his second and constitutionally final term as President of Kenya. So a really important area for Kenya, and something that we have got great science as a basis for our further work in. Finally, some examples of why I'm so excited about our UK-Kenya partnerships around innovation and entrepreneurship and how they can be applied to agri-food. So the Kenya Catalytic Jobs Fund, this is a programme that's got a Dragon's Den style to it. We had the first award round about a year ago, actually, and one of the companies that were successful is a social enterprise called 10 Cents. 10 Cents is working directly with farmers on production of cashew nuts. Cashew, obviously a high value crop for export, and they're helping farmers to produce them to organic and fair trade standards so they can get better prices for their product. Another programme we've been supporting is Go Global. This is funded by the UK's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, DCMS. Again, it was a pitch competition. One of the winners was Myfugo. So my friend Tony has been incredibly grateful for what he got through this programme. The winners were taken to the UK for 2 weeks for a very intense programme of training and business development workshops, and a big focus on setting up mentoring relationships and introductions to investors. Tony's done very well out of this. His product is a sort of digital collar on cows that enables dairy farmers to get real-time rich data on the health of their cows, so they can then tweak the conditions in order to increase productivity and therefore the profitability of their farms. Garden Fresh, an example of how we have been very nimble in pivoting a number of our programmes to respond to the very acute challenges posed by COVID-19. Here, for this project, we identified that supply chains of fresh vegetables to the urban poor were being broken, disrupted due to those restrictions that I mentioned before. So we've helped to pivot Garden Fresh to provide urban agricultural products to urban poor to overcome that problem of supply chains. And back to the science, the James Hutton Institute in Scotland and the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture are doing work to look at varieties of potatoes across East Africa. Currently there aren't very many varieties, which means that there is a susceptibility to large-scale damage from, for example, disease or climatic shifts. But they're looking at a new variety of potato that will be resistant to nematodes. That's not a phrase I've used in a presentation before. So there we go. I hope that these slides have given you a sense of our excitement about agri-food and the disruption that we can be part of in the Kenyan market for the good of Kenya and the East Africa region, and in response to these very challenging times that we face, and using the most of the tech, the dynamism, the entrepreneurship and the innovation in the region and here in the room today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Susie, for your talk about the agri-food landscape in Kenya. We are now going to hear Professor William Otim Nape that kindly agreed in presenting about the regional economic and sector description in Uganda.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Otim Nape. I come from Uganda. I'll give you an overview of the agri-food industry in East Africa. For those of you who are not so familiar with this region, East Africa is that landmass that borders the Indian Ocean. It includes 13 countries, namely Sudan, Eritrea, Djibouti, Somalia, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Seychelles, Comoros, Madagascar, and Mauritius. The region has a total population of about 400 million, with a total GDP of about 360 billion US dollars. The average per capita GDP is about 3,000 US dollars, but this varies between $235 in South Sudan to about 17,000 in Seychelles. Agriculture is one of the East Africa's most important sectors. The sector contributes 26% to the GDP of the region. It accounts for 71% of the total labor force, and over 75% of the total agricultural output comes from smallholder farmers, who own about 2.5 hectares per household. There is huge land for cultivation. About 33% of total land mass is arable. A diversity of agroecological zones and farming systems allow for different types of crops and livestock species to be produced in this region. Agri-food industry, which is the business of producing food through agricultural production, is a very important sector of the East African economy. It represents over US dollars 1 trillion in business opportunity. In 2019, the regional agri-food trade with the European Union amounted to about 1.6 trillion euros. The export commodities were coffee, tea, flowers, spices, fruits and vegetables, among others. The figure here illustrates the different components of the agri-food export to the European Union. Coffee and tea make up about 30% of the export. This is followed by cut flowers and plants, also making up about 30% of the exports. Tropical fruits, raw tobacco, bulbs, roots and live plants, and vegetables, both in chilled and dried forms, each make up about 8% of the total export. This, therefore, signifies the importance of the agri-food system from East Africa to the European for trade with the European Union, including the United Kingdom. Illustrated in the figures that follow. Here on this table, we want to show land and labor productivity for the region beginning 1990 to 2012. We can see from this table that in terms of land productivity, the East African region received the lowest return on land productivity compared to the other African regions such as Central, Western, Northern Africa, and the whole Sub-Saharan Africa. This is true for the period 1991 to 2000 and for 2001 to 2012. In terms of labor productivity, the similar situation applies. Labor productivity in Eastern Africa is lowest compared to other regions in the continent. And this is true for the period 1990 to 2000 and period 2000 and 2012. In terms of yields, the figures here illustrates the changes in yields for beef in terms of carcass weight per animal, and for cereal yields in terms of tons per hectare. For the beef sector, we can see that since 1965, hardly any improvement has been registered in the region. And this is true for the different countries, such as in Rwanda, such as in Tanzania, and even in Kenya and Uganda, with the exception of Burundi, where some positive improvement has been registered since then. In terms of cereal productivity, some good improvement has been achieved since 1965. Yield has continued to increase up to about 2000, after which it is slowed down a little bit. But we can also see that in some countries, such as Kenya, yield has continued to increase since 1965. It kind of picked up between 1985 and 1990, and then since then it has been on a gradual decline. The same applies in the case of Uganda. We had good improvement up to about 1990, 1995, after which it started to decline. Same is also true for Tanzania, where good improvement was achieved up to the same period, 1990-95, and this declined slightly. These illustrations emphasizes the importance of addressing the causes of low productivity in both livestock and crop sectors. Other constraints to the sector are weak land tenure system, poor access to land, and poor land rights and land fragmentation. There is also lack of access to credit. There is low investment in the sector, and also lack of access to inputs and output markets. There is weak agriculture extension and innovation service to farmers, and the impact of climate change continues to affect productivity. Despite these challenges, there are key growth areas and opportunities for innovation. For instance, in the traditional food crop subsector, opportunities exist in maize, rice, potato, cassava, among others. And in the case of traditional cash and export crops, opportunities exist in tea, coffee, cotton, tobacco, coconut, and cashew nuts. While in the fruits, vegetables, and spices sector, there are huge opportunities in avocado, cashew nuts, cloves, vanilla, chilies, among others. And in the areas of oilseeds, there are opportunities in simsim, soya beans, and sunflower. And as for livestock and poultry, opportunities exist in the beef and dairy cattle, sheep and goats, hides and skins, and in eggs and poultry meat. There are also opportunities in fisheries, both marine and freshwater fisheries, and in aquaculture. And opportunity also exists in forestry products, particularly timber, honey, and gum arabic. This also presents opportunities for networking and collaboration. And these opportunities basically hinge around improving productivity, agro-processing and market development, building entrepreneurship and agribusiness capacity, and improving the enabling environment, which can be achieved through development of regional inclusive agro-food value chains, building resilience of agri-food system to external shocks and risks, such as climate change impacts, pest and disease epidemics, among others. Opportunities for networking and collaboration also exist in strengthening sustainability of agri-food systems through circular economy, and in building entrepreneurship and agribusiness capacity of actors. Opportunities also exist in improving and enabling environment for agri-food systems to thrive, and in addressing policy, institutional, and incentive constraints, and promoting local and foreign investments. In conclusion, I therefore wish to say that agri-food system is a very important sector to the economy of Eastern Africa. There is abundant land for cultivation, and a diversity of crops and livestock species can be produced. Although this sector faces a number of challenges, it also offers great opportunities for the agri-food industry. Exploitation of these opportunities will require increased investments, innovation in key growth subsectors, networking and collaboration through public-private partnerships, and implementation of regional inclusive agri-food value chains. The development of agri-food industry will also contribute to the COVID-19 response. It is my hope that you have enjoyed this talk, and I wish to thank you for listening. You are welcome.
Thanks everybody for listening to those presentations. Firstly, just apologies for some of the audio issues in those recordings. As I said at the beginning, we're not, the people that are recording are not necessarily professionals. We're not, I'm not a professional recorder or anything like that. And so there might be some audio issues, but that's because we wanted to do these virtually, and this is the best format to do it. So apologies for that, but I'm sure you will have enjoyed the presentations because they were excellent. So we're just going to go to the question and answer session of this session. I can see some of you have been typing them into the YouTube and the Facebook chat, so thank you for those. We're going to start with those. Just bear in mind that I think Susie is unable to attend via Zoom, so she's dialing in on her phone, so the audio from her may not be as robust, but she's coming from Nairobi, which is part of the issue that she's having. So I think first of all we'll cut to Agri-Tech Catalyst round 10, if that's okay, Catherine, because we've got a couple around the scope of the funding, so it might just be useful to perhaps just give an overview of that, just so that we can head off a bunch of those questions. So over to you, Catherine. Could you just tell us a little bit about what's in scope for the Agri-Tech Catalyst round 10?
Yeah, certainly. Good morning, everyone. So in terms of the scope for Agri-Tech Catalyst round 10, the scope is very broad. It includes innovations around livestock production, crop production, food systems and nutrition. So it includes things like food manufacturing challenges and food processing, storage and distribution. So it is very broad. I've seen there's been a couple of sort of specific questions around food waste. So reducing post-harvest food loss would be in scope. There was a question about water specifically. There isn't a specific water use theme, but if you are, improving efficiencies, improving productivity in crop production, for example, then yes, that would be in scope. And in terms of Agri-Tech Catalyst Round 10, there is another webinar this afternoon which goes into a bit more detail. So if you are interested in that one, I'd recommend you listen in to that one too.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Catherine, for that answer. And just as Catherine mentioned, there is some more information coming out this afternoon. So if you're particularly interested in that round, do tune in to that. We have a question now for Susie, who's joining us via the phone. This is from Anne Fleck. Firstly, she's saying, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. Could you comment on egg production in Kenya and any current innovations? So over to you, Susie. Susie, are you able to comment?
Sorry, was I muted?
Livestock production, crop production, food systems and nutrition.
Yeah, so over to you, Susie. We heard you briefly. If you just unmute yourself again, and if you could take that question on egg production, that would be great.
Sure. So I don't really have much of an answer on egg production, I'm afraid, but we are aware of various impact investments going into the poultry sector. The comment I made about mayonnaise is actually being taken up by the Deputy Governor of Taita Taveta, who was keen to see that as a new agri-processing sector in that county. So I don't have detail to add, but it feels hopeful. And Tristan, who's also listening in, has a bit more on poultry if the questioner wants to ask him directly. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Susie, for that answer. Great to hear how it's developing from that. And just another one whilst you're still on the phone. We've had a question here just about how you're working with PhD challenges and boosting agriculture. And I wondered if you could care to comment on just some of the education, sort of research, education developments around agri-food innovation within Kenya. I know that with this scope particularly, we are interested in academics collaborating with other organisations. So perhaps you'd be able to comment on how you see that happening within Kenya.
Sure. Well, yeah, we're really buoyed by having totted up, thanks to UK CDR's work, the amount of research partnerships, the value, monetary value of those coming into Kenya. It was something that was picked up on by the Cabinet Secretary for Education a couple of weeks ago when he and the High Commissioner co-hosted the Science, High-Level Science and Research Oversight Board that looks at UK and Kenya research programmes. And in fact, there was an op-ed that's come out of that meeting that's in the Daily Star today in Kenya, and I tweeted it last week. So the government is very keen that we do what we can to ensure that research is carefully linked into policy and action that's been taken in Kenya and around agriculture, that is specifically around food security, one of President Kenyatta's big four. So the work that we've got from UK CDR gives us a better hook into what the overall ODA funded research that's happening here. And we now have a bilateral mechanism to feed that into government of Kenya. So if there's people who are doing research that was not captured by UK CDR, we'd love to hear about it so we can make sure that's part of the joint action plan as well.
Excellent, thank you, Susie. And one last question, as it's and I'll go to some of the others. It's come in. This is from Simon Holland. He's asking, He says he's been working with ILRI and Farmers Choice on a platform to reduce risk for smallholder pig farmers in light of ASF. And do you have any advice on finance partners to engage banks, microfinance, mobile? So how do people access finance within the agri-food sector in Kenya, I guess, is the sort of the broad picture here, a broad question.
Yes, and it's a tricky one for me because actually, as you may have already covered, DFID are not directly funding agriculture programs bilaterally in Kenya at the moment. And that is a reflection of the very complex political dynamics around it that has meant it is not a sector that, as a government, we are currently getting involved in. Now, obviously, we are doing a lot around agri-tech and agri-business and supporting research and all of those connections that I talked about during the presentation. But we don't have government funding directly into pure agriculture at the moment. So I think that, again, Tristan's input here would be helpful because he's already identified the impact of investing around poultry. He may well know about pig farming too, and possibly ILRI as well, who I think are also part of this mission. So I'm going to shamelessly pass the buck over to them on that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I realise I'm asking you some specific questions. So Tristan, who's part of this mission, will be able to pick up any specific questions on that. I believe he's in the chat on YouTube. I'm sure he would help us with that. Or if you do have some follow-up questions, do send them to us directly. We have an email address, GCRF.AgriFood, which you can access. Question over to Catherine. This is from Robert Marchant. Given the importance of dairy and meat production, will there be dedicated support into the challenges smallholder pastoral communities are facing?
Hi, thanks for the question. Not specifically within this programme. So the Agri-Tech Catalyst, the main sort of aim of the Catalyst really is to have a broad scope and fund sort of the best innovations from whichever sector and whichever country the applications come in from. So we're not being specific on things like that, but that would be in scope, and all projects that are funded through the Catalyst have to sort of show that benefit to smallholders in the African countries. So yes, they would be in scope, but we're not targeting specific sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I'll just try and ask a question to William. I know he may be having some technical issues, but we'll see if we can get a question, an answer out of him if possible. Just with your work with AFRI, I wondered about some of the innovations that you are seeing that are supporting these smallholder pastoral communities in Uganda. Would you care to comment on the innovations around dairy and meat production in Uganda, and specifically how those are impacting on smallholders? William, if you're able to unmute yourself. GCRF.AgriFood. I think we can hear the audio playing. So, question over to Catherine. Okay, well, let me move on to another question, so bear with me a moment. Okay, here's one from Duncan Allen. Dairy is a growth sector in East Africa, especially in Kenya, but it hasn't received much profile in these presentations. Dairy productivity is low but increasing. Lots of opportunities to improve productivity, particularly among semi-commercial farmers. Feed is a big issue and my core interest. I wonder if perhaps Jane, who we've not heard from, would care to comment on that.
Thanks, Tim. I think you'll find it's Alan Duncan up at Edinburgh, who's a joint appointee, I know, between ILRI and the University of Edinburgh. I think that Catherine's point is that dairy is perfectly within scope within the programme that we're supporting now. And we would also really welcome if Alan wanted to come and present maybe at the second week of missions, to come and tell us a little bit more about how important dairy is. So that would be the week commencing the 15th of July, I believe, Tim, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's
yeah.
right.
So maybe Alan, if you could give us a call and come and talk to the second week of missions.
That's seamless. I see it seamless. I love that, Jane. That's very good. Just perhaps a question over to Susie. I know that East Africa at the moment is particularly under stress in terms of its agri-food sector because of the locust situation that's happening because of COVID as well. And I just wonder if you would care to comment on some of the specifics of that and how you're seeing that impacting the agri-food sector in that region. That's useful to us as members of this listening, because some of the innovations we would hope would target some of these particular problems. So it's always very useful to hear your views on this. So over to you, Susie.
Thanks. Yeah, so we talk about the triple threat here at the moment, which is locusts, droughts and floods, and now COVID. So there are a lot of really potentially disastrous things happening and hitting the agriculture sector very hard. So on locusts, actually the impact on productivity hasn't been as bad as we thought, but that is because last year, apparently, so I mean, obviously I'm doing this secondhand, but last year was so wet that crop productivity was high. So even though the locusts have done a huge amount of damage, actually overall, we haven't seen as much of a drop as we had feared. But there are people using drones and other technology to try and watch and predict where the locusts are going so that we can advise farmers on spraying appropriately, which will help, but it is a huge problem. And then weather shifts. We're seeing a lot of weather-related events across Kenya at the moment, likely related to climate change, make that more difficult because obviously spraying and then heavy rain mitigates the impact of the spraying and has a separate impact on the locusts as well. So those are two things that interplay together very badly. The impact of COVID is more around distribution. So we had hoped over the weekend to see a lifting of some of the restrictions between counties, and Nairobi itself is locked down. Parts of Nairobi are more stringently locked down than others, as is Mombasa, Old Town, which is restricting the ability to transfer crops to markets or to processors. So yes, it's a really bad data set of problems at the moment that we're looking at. Helpfully, technology seems to be part of the solution, and that's where we're focusing some efforts at the moment.
Thank you very much for that answer. If I may, I know that we're going to be hearing from Catherine this afternoon, and I know that William's having technical issues. So just another question, Susie, if that's okay, just whilst we have you here with us. So this scope, one of the important requirements, and quite rightly so, is just that we want to make sure that it's an inclusive call, and the role of women and young girls is sort of highlighted as a point that needs to be met in any of the projects that we're developing. I know Kenya has a particular focus on encouraging young people and women into agriculture and into innovation. Would you just care to comment on that and how we can encourage that within any projects that we're developing as a group of members?
Absolutely, yes. Really, really important that we try to redress the balance here by supporting women in agriculture, as we do in other sectors as well. We have programs around the full range of empowerment, including education, access to finance, mentoring, and connectivity. And we've focused heavily on women, for example, around the Africa Investment Summit in January of this year, where we brought over female founders and female entrepreneurs to give them that profile and platform. So that's one way in which we're tackling it. And I mean, the COVID crisis has, of course, made life even more difficult for women who, and this is a gross generalization, but who generally have a harder lot in Kenya, as in many places already. So the impact of lockdown that affecting domestic abuse, gender-based violence is horrific. So we're also looking at it from a sort of security angle to safeguard women as a basic requirement, and then to get them sustainable and protected income generating secure jobs.
That's great. Thank you, Susie. I think that about wraps it up for today's session. I would just like to thank once again all our panelists for presenting so wonderfully. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, William. Thank you, Catherine. And thank you, Jane, for your very informative presentations. Apologies again from me just for some of the audio issues that we've had, some of the issues with the panelists. But I think perhaps you'll bear with us and recognise that the new world in which we live is an untested one in some ways, and so these virtual missions are the best way to get around some of those issues, but they do come with their own challenges. So thank you very much. Do come along this afternoon. We'd love to hear you, and there'll be further opportunities to discuss some of the specifics around the funding mechanisms for this programme. So thank you very much, and we shall speak to you later. Thank you.